Sandra was sharing with me just a few minutes ago a devotional that she had read today. And as she read the story, I was reminded of a number of times that I can remember when my life was at risk. Times when I had accidents or had been at the wrong place at the wrong time and found myself facing near-death experiences. There was a time when I was hunting in the field, dove shooting with my son, and the birds crossed over in front of us, and he got a little close to Daddy's head when he squeezed off the trigger, and I got quite a bit of powder burn. It was a time of fright for me. I didn't know how bad I was hurt at the time. Then there was the time I fell into a near frozen lake while fishing, and again my son had to come to the front and engage the trolling motor and drag the boat and me to shallow water where I might be able to get my feet on the bottom and again and not die.
And he was very young.
10 years old.
Yeah.
But as she read that devotion, I thought about the times that God has been there for me. He might have used the hands of my son at one time to harm me, another time to save me. But God was there, and God was determined that I should survive those instances. I remember my mother telling me the story about how after my sister was born, the doctor said, "You cannot have any more children. Your circulation is so bad, if you ever get pregnant again, you'll not survive, the child will not survive. You all be careful, don't do that." Well, unbeknownst to my dad and mom, 7 years later, she showed up to be expecting a baby. That baby boy was me. And after months of being near death and being bedridden, she delivered a baby boy. And I had all kinds of complications from breathing, bronchitis, lungs not fully developed. But God spared me through that. And I can see from what she was saying that God has been with me in many times when my life could have been taken. And yet he spared me because he is gracious and he cares for us in unusual ways. Now, I want her to share some of this devotion with you. I want you to think about the times maybe that you have been rescued by God. Maybe you didn't at the time even give him credit for it. But as you look back on it now, you realize that God is working all the time behind the scenes to take care of his children. Share that with us, honey, would you?
Well, the devotional was from Psalm 13, and it starts out in verse 1. How long wilt thou forget me, O Lord? Forever? How long wilt thou hide thy face from me? And it goes on to say, consider and hear me, O Lord, my God. Lighten my eyes, lest I sleep the sleep of death. And the verses that they
used in that devotional.
Yeah, but that wasn't the word I was using. But
Okay.
the verses that were used were 5 and 6. It says, I trust in your unfailing love. I will rejoice because you have rescued me.
Mm-hmm.
I will sing to the Lord because he has been so good to me. And it says in the early verses of Psalm 13, the psalmist called out to God and heard nothing in return. What could he count on to carry him through that bleak moment? He reached deep within and pulled out memories of the times God had rescued him in the past.
Amen.
Times he had his back to the wall and had seen the hand of God move. Times he had felt abandoned and later discovered that God had been working behind the scenes in ways that were miraculous. It was those memories that allowed him to sing of God's goodness in the midst of overwhelming circumstances. The psalmist's experience is much like a soldier crouched behind a barrier. Gunshots are fired, they're exploding all around, and he's unaware that the general sits on a higher plane, mapping out the enemy's next move. It is only when the smoke is cleared and the general's plan is revealed that the soldier understands that he was never alone. Sometimes we may wonder where God is when we are in the middle of a battle.
Amen.
But it is the memory of past victories that allow us to sing while we wait for Him to rescue us. And I thought about some things that are going on with us that even this week, some situations that have been very uncomfortable, and not understanding why things have to go as they do.
Mm-hmm.
But I have realized that I've been praying more to the Lord to give me peace of mind, calm my heart,
Mm-hmm.
and just kept saying, Lord, I don't know how this is going to work out, but I know I'm trusting you to work it for our good. I don't know what the answer is going to be. I don't know how He's going to show us Himself in the situation, but I believe He's going to, because I can look back and I can see when God has brought us through some really tough times.
One of the hardest things I've ever gone through was just a few years ago, 10 years ago or so, when I had major back surgery to correct a disc problem, and long surgery, and then an infection set in, and a very difficult 3 or 4 months for me. And my life was in danger. I know that we were both worried and silly that I might not pull through that. But I remembered I did, during those times, you're on medication that causes you to see things and to not handle everything the way you normally would. And I remember recalling those situations where God had stepped in before and saved my life. And somehow I gained strength from that. I think that's what the psalmist is saying.
Yeah.
When he didn't think God was even anywhere near, he began to think about how many times he'd been with him before and he didn't know it. Maybe you're the same way. I bet you've got some situations in your life where God has revealed Himself not to you in a time of crisis, but then when you needed Him, you found out He was there all the time.
Right.
Prayer is a wonderful, wonderful privilege we have to call on God when we need Him.
I liked the closing of this after a prayer that said, Lord, I can't help but praise you when I remember all the times you have rescued me in the past.
Mm-hmm.
There were times when I felt alone and realized only later that you were there all along. I see your handiwork in those valleys as you gently guide me when I stumbled.
Yes.
You held my hand and lifted me up to the mountaintops once again. Help me to trust you for what I am facing today.
Mm-hmm.
And Oswald Chambers wrote, it is the trial of our faith that is precious. If we go through the trial, there is so much wealth laid up in our heavenly bank to draw upon when the next test comes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's so true. We do have to draw from the resources of past experience and the answers to prayer, and watching how God's brought us through a lot of things.
I know it will encourage you as it has me. Stop and think about the times God has helped you when you didn't really expect it or didn't know it was Him. And then thank Him. Stop and thank Him for that. It'll be encouraging to you, I'm sure.
Right.
I think about the little chorus that we've sung so many times that just simply says, God is so good. God is so good. Do you remember that chorus? Mm-hmm. Would you sing that with me? Because that's true.
God is so good. God is so good. God is so good. He's so good to me. He answers prayer. He answers prayer. He answers prayer. He's so good to me. Thank you for joining us today. I hope as we've recalled some memories that we have of God's goodness to us, that you'll be able to do that as well. And we'll all be encouraged. That's right.
Have a good evening. Hope to see you here next time we have encouragement with the Johnsons.
Bye-bye.
Bye.